The rain began the moment Clara Bennett said yes. It struck the windows of the lawyer's office in Redwood Crossing with sharp, restless taps, as if the sky itself was impatient for her answer. Clara did not look at the man across the desk. She stared instead at a dark knot in the wooden floor, wondering how something so small could decide the shape of an entire life. She was 19 years old, dressed in her best coat, the one her father had bought her before he fell ill. It hung a little loose on her shoulders now. Everything felt that way lately, slightly too big, slightly out of place, as if the world had shifted and she was still trying to stand straight inside it. The lawyer cleared his throat and repeated the terms in a steady, careful voice. A legal marriage, no deception, a respectable arrangement, a widowed rancher in need of a wife. In return, the debts would be settled. The house would remain in the Bennett family. Her mother and younger brother would not be turned out. Clara nodded once. The sound of it echoed in her head. Across town, her mother Margaret sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. She had stopped drinking it hours ago. Since her husband's death, she moved through the house like someone afraid of waking a sleeping child. She spoke softly, walked carefully, as if grief might break if handled too roughly. Luke tried to be brave. He stacked firewood without being asked. He offered to quit school. He said things like, "We'll manage," even though his boots had holes and his eyes followed Clara every time she left the room. He knew what her silence meant. Children always know before anyone says it out loud. The lawyer slid the papers forward. "If you're certain, Miss Bennett." Clara picked up the pen. Her fingers trembled just once before she forced them still. She thought of her father's hands, strong and steady, teaching her how to guide a horse without fear. She thought of the night he died, how the house felt suddenly too large, too quiet, like a place abandoned by warmth itself. She signed her name. The sound of the pen scratching paper felt louder than the rain. By evening, the storm had grown heavier. Wind pushed against the Bennett house, making the walls groan like tired bones. Clara packed a single suitcase. She folded her dresses neatly, as if order might give her courage. Margaret stood in the doorway, twisting a handkerchief until it was nothing but a rope of cloth. "You don't have to be strong for us," her mother said, though her voice shook. "I'm your mother. It should be me." Clara smiled, small but certain. "You already have been. Now it's my turn." Luke hugged her hard, too hard, his face pressed into her coat. "You'll come back," he said, not asking. Clara rested her chin on his head. "Of course," she replied, even though she did not know what that word meant anymore. When she stepped outside, the wind cut through her like a blade. The road leading away from home stretched dark and slick, disappearing into sheets of rain. The carriage waited, lantern glowing faintly, like the last light of something familiar. She climbed inside without looking back. If she did, she knew she might not be able to leave. As the wheels began to turn, Clara pressed her hands together in her lap. Her heart raced, not with excitement, but with a tight, aching fear she refused to name. She told herself this was not surrender. It was responsibility. It was love, shaped into something hard and necessary. Somewhere ahead was a man she had never met, a house she had never seen, and a life already filled with other people's grief. She wondered if there would be room for her in it, or if she would simply disappear into the work of keeping everyone else standing. The storm followed her down the road, rain blurring the past behind her and the future ahead. Clara closed her eyes and took a slow breath. She had made a choice, and it felt like there had never been another one at all. The house at Oak Hollow Ranch did not feel like a home when Clara Bennett first stepped inside. It felt like a place that had been paused, waiting for something that never came. The front door closed behind her with a soft, final sound. Clara stood still, her suitcase at her feet, listening. No laughter, no voices, only the low tick of a clock and the distant creak of wood settling. Outside, the wind moved across the open land, but inside the house the air was heavy and still. Samuel Harding stood a few steps away from her. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered, dressed neatly but plainly. His hair was dark with hints of gray, his face calm in a way that felt practiced. When he spoke, his voice was even and polite, as if he were greeting a guest instead of a wife. You made good time," he said. "The road can be rough this season." "Yes," Clara replied. Her voice sounded smaller than she wanted it to. It wasn't too bad. He nodded, then gestured toward the room behind him. "You'll want to set your things down. Supper will be ready soon." That was it. No welcome, no warmth, just information. Clara followed him into the house, taking in everything at once. The furniture was sturdy and well cared for, but nothing was personal. No pictures on the walls, no signs of recent joy. The place was clean in a careful, unfinished way, like someone had stopped halfway through living. They passed a doorway, and Clara felt eyes on her. She turned and saw a boy standing there, thin and quiet, his hands tucked into his sleeves. He did not smile or speak. He simply watched her, his expression unreadable. When Clara offered a gentle nod, he disappeared back into the room. Samuel did not comment. He moved through the house like someone used to silence. In the kitchen, Jonah Reed stood by the table, removing his hat when he saw her. His face was weathered, his posture relaxed but respectful. "Ma'am," he said kindly. "I'm Jonah. I run things around here." "It's nice to meet you," Clara said, grateful for the sound of a friendly voice. Jonah smiled, but there was caution in it. "If you need anything, you just say the word." The children appeared one by one as supper was set out. 5 of them, different ages, all carrying the same quiet weight. One girl kept her eyes on the floor. Another child sat stiff and straight, hands folded, as if afraid to move wrong. The youngest clutched a worn piece of cloth and leaned away from Clara as far as the chair would allow. Samuel took his place at the head of the table. Clara sat when he did. No one spoke. Forks moved slowly. The only sounds were the scrape of metal and the soft clink of dishes. Clara felt every movement she made, every breath she took, as if the room were watching her without looking. She wanted to say something, anything, but she did not know where to begin. After the meal, the children left the table quickly, one after another, without asking. Samuel watched them go, his expression unchanged. When the last footsteps faded, he stood. "They keep to themselves," he said, not looking at her. "They've had time to get used to it." Clara nodded. "I understand." But she did not. Not yet. He showed her to a small bedroom at the end of the hall. It was clean, prepared, and empty of any personal touch. A bed, a chair, a window looking out over the yard. "This will be yours," Samuel said. "If you need anything changed, let me know." "I will," Clara replied. He hesitated, just for a moment, as if there were more he might say. Then he nodded and left. Clara sat on the edge of the bed and let out a breath she had been holding all day. She felt like a stranger in every sense of the word. She had come here to solve a problem, but the problem was larger than she had imagined. Grief lived in these walls. It shaped every step, every silence. As night settled over the ranch, Clara lay awake, listening to the wind and the distant sounds of the house. Somewhere down the hall, a child cried quietly, the sound cut short as if swallowed by habit. Clara stared into the dark, her chest tight with a mix of fear and resolve. She had entered a house full of loss. Whatever this place had been before, it was not that anymore. And somehow, she knew this was only the beginning. By the 3rd morning, the sky over Oak Hollow Ranch had turned a hard, flat gray, the kind that pressed down on the land and made everything feel smaller. Clara stood at the window, watching snow drift sideways across the yard. The wind had been rising since dawn, and by noon the fence lines were already fading from sight. Samuel came in from outside, brushing snow from his coat. "It's coming in fast," he said. "We won't be going anywhere today." The children hovered near the walls, sensing the change. Storm days had their own rules. Clara could see it in their eyes. The way they stayed close, but not together. Each one guarding their own small space. The house felt tighter as the snow thickened, the silence pressing in harder with every hour. The fire burned low by mid-afternoon. Samuel added wood, his movements quiet and automatic. Clara noticed how he avoided the center of the room, how he stayed near doors and windows, as if ready to step out of his own life at any moment. When the wind howled louder, the youngest child startled and began to cry. The sound cut through the house, sharp and sudden. No one moved. The older children looked away. Samuel froze, his hands still on the fire poker, his face pale. Clara felt something shift inside her. Without thinking, she crossed the room and knelt in front of the child. She spoke softly, steady, the way her father had spoken to frightened animals during storms. She did not rush. She did not demand. She waited. "It's all right," she said. "You're safe here." The crying slowed. Small hands clutched her sleeve. The room seemed to exhale. That was when the power of the storm truly set in. The wind rattled the windows, and snow packed itself against the doors. By evening, it was clear they were cut off. Jonah Reed made it to the house before dark, shaking his head as he stamped snow from his boots. "Road's gone," he said. "We'll have to ride this out." Supper that night was simple. Clara set the table without being asked. She placed the plates carefully, counting them twice. When she sat down, the children followed, unsure but present. Samuel watched her from across the table, his expression guarded. Halfway through the meal, one of the older boys pushed his chair back. "It was like this before," he said suddenly, his voice tight. "The night she didn't come home." The room went still. Samuel's face closed off. "That's enough," he said, firm but distant. The boy's hands curled into fists. "You said she'd be back. You always said that." Clara's heart pounded. She understood then that this storm was not just weather. It was memory. It was a door that had never been fully closed. Samuel stood, his chair scraping the floor. "Go to your room." The boy hesitated, then obeyed, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. The children stared at their plates. No one spoke. Clara felt the weight of a choice settle on her shoulders. She could stay quiet. She could keep the peace. Or she could do something that might break what little balance existed. She took a breath. "He's scared," she said gently. "They all are." Samuel turned toward her, surprise flickering across his face. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Maybe not," Clara replied. "But I know what it's like to wait for someone who isn't coming back." The words were out before she could stop them. Images of her father filled her mind. The long nights, the hope that hurt more than the truth. Samuel's shoulders sagged, just slightly. He sat back down, his hands resting flat on the table. "I thought staying quiet would protect them," he said, his voice low. "I thought if we didn't talk about it, it wouldn't hurt as much." Clara looked around the table at the children, their eyes wide, their faces drawn tight with feelings they did not know how to carry. "Sometimes," she said, "silence makes the hurt louder." No one argued. After supper, the children lingered instead of rushing away. One asked if Clara would tell a story. She did, a simple one, about a farm and a stubborn horse, and a storm that passed. As she spoke, the wind eased, just a little. That night, as snow continued to fall, Clara realized something had changed. She had not planned to take charge. She had not asked for it. But in the middle of fear and memory, she had stepped forward. And for the first time since she arrived, the house did not feel quite so cold. Weeks passed. and the house at Oak Hollow Ranch began to change in ways that were quiet, but steady. Clara did not announce herself as the reason. She simply stayed. She listened. She noticed what others missed. Mornings no longer began in complete silence. The children started to appear at the table one by one, sometimes sleepy, sometimes cautious, but present. Clara learned who liked their bread warm and who preferred it plain. She remembered small things and treated them as important. In a house that had learned to expect nothing, this alone mattered. Samuel watched these changes from a distance at first. He spoke little, but he stopped retreating into himself as often. He lingered near the doorway when Clara read to the younger children in the evenings. He paused in the hall when he heard laughter, as if unsure whether he was allowed to enter that sound. The first real shift came on a Sunday morning. The church stood at the edge of town, simple and worn. It had been a long time since the Harding family had walked through its doors together. The children were uneasy, tugging at sleeves and casting glances toward Samuel. He hesitated on the steps, his hand resting on the doorframe. "We don't have to go in," he said quietly, as if offering them an escape. Clara shook her head gently. "We can try," she said. "If it feels wrong, we can leave." Inside, heads turned, whispers followed, not unkind, but curious. The children sat stiff and close together. Clara kept her hands folded in her lap, aware of every movement. When the service began, she felt Samuel shift beside her, his jaw tight, his gaze fixed forward. Afterward, a few townspeople approached. Simple greetings, offers of help. One woman knelt to speak to the youngest child at eye level. Another pressed a loaf of bread into Clara's hands. The children watched, unsure but attentive. When they stepped back into the sunlight, Samuel let out a slow breath, like someone who had been holding it for years. "They remember us," he said, surprised. "They never forgot," Clara replied. At home, the yard slowly filled with life again. The children helped Jonah with chores. They argued over small things, then made up. Clara stood on the porch, watching them run, their voices carrying across the open land. It was not perfect. There were still moments of anger, of tears, of doors closed too hard. But those moments no longer defined the house. One evening, Samuel stayed at the table long after the children had gone to bed. The lamp burned low. His hands were rough and still. "I failed them," he said at last. "After my wife died, I thought keeping everything quiet was the best way. I didn't see what it was doing to them." Clara met his eyes. "You were hurting too." "That doesn't make it right," he replied. "No," she said, "but it means you can change it." He nodded slowly, as if testing the idea. From that night on, Samuel began to speak more openly with his children. He asked questions. He listened to answers he did not always like. When one of them cried, he stayed instead of walking away. The children noticed. They trusted him a little more each day. Clara found her place not by force, but by presence. She braided hair. She mended clothes. She sat through stories that went nowhere, and feelings that had no clear shape. She became the steady center the house had been missing, not because she demanded it, but because she offered it without condition. Laughter returned in small pieces. A shared joke at the table, a song hummed while dishes were washed. Even the walls seemed lighter, as if sound itself had permission to exist again. One afternoon, Clara stood in the yard with Samuel, watching the children play. The sun was warm. The air smelled of grass and dust. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. Clara looked at him, surprised. "Yes," she said simply. "I did." And for the first time, Samuel smiled, not out of politeness, but because he meant it. Spring did not arrive all at once at Oak Hollow Ranch. It came slowly, in small signs that were easy to miss if you were not paying attention. The snow melted from the fence posts first. The ground softened. The air carried a warmth that felt careful, as if it did not want to startle anyone. Clara noticed everything. She stood on the porch one morning, watching the children chase each other through the yard, their boots kicking up dust instead of snow. Their laughter carried across the open land, steady and real. It no longer felt borrowed. It belonged here now. The house behind her was full in a way it had not been before. Not with things, but with presence. Doors were left open. Voices moved from room to room. The quiet that once pressed down on every corner had loosened its hold. Samuel joined her on the porch, handing her a cup of coffee. Their fingers brushed, and neither pulled away. For a moment, they stood side by side without speaking, the way people do when silence no longer feels like a wall. "There's a gathering in town this weekend," he said. "Nothing fancy? Just folks getting together?" Clara nodded. "That sounds nice." He hesitated, then added, "You don't have to go if you don't want to." She looked at him then, really looked at him. Not as the man who had needed a solution, not as the name on a piece of paper, but as someone who had been learning, step by step, how to live again. "I want to go," she said. The day of the gathering was clear and bright. The children dressed themselves, arguing over buttons and boots, laughing when someone got it wrong. Samuel watched them with a look that mixed pride and disbelief, as if he were still surprised by joy. At the gathering, Clara moved easily among the people. She greeted neighbors. She listened to stories. She felt the steady presence of the family around her, no longer separate, no longer unsure. When someone referred to her as Samuel's wife, she did not flinch. Later, as the sun dipped low, music played softly, and the children ran until they were breathless. Clara stood near the edge of the crowd, watching them, her heart full and uneasy all at once. Samuel found her there. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," she said. Then, after a pause, "I was thinking about when I first came here." He nodded. "I didn't know what to expect." "Neither did I," she replied. "I thought I was being given away." The words hung between them, honest and unguarded. "And now?" Samuel asked quietly. Clara took a breath. She thought of her mother and brother, safe. She thought of the storm, the silence, the children's faces when they learned it was all right to feel again. She thought of the long road that had brought her here. "Now," she said, "I know I stayed." Samuel looked at her for a long moment. "So did I," he said, "because I wanted to, not because I had to." When they returned to the ranch that evening, the sky was painted with soft light. The children ran ahead, calling to each other, already planning tomorrow. Clara followed more slowly, feeling the weight of the day settle into something warm and sure. Inside the house, she paused. For the first time since she had arrived, she realized she no longer felt like a guest. She moved through the rooms with ease, each step grounded in belonging. Later that night, when the house grew quiet again, Clara stood at the window. The land stretched out before her, wide and open. No longer something to fear. She had come to Oak Hollow Ranch as an answer to a problem. She stayed because she chose to build something real. And somewhere, on a road far behind her, a storm finally lost its power.